In the year 301 BCE, a merchant from Cyprus stood on the edge of the sea and watched what remained of his life drift in pieces against the rocks. His name was Zeno of Citium. His ship had been carrying a cargo of purple dye, luxury goods, carefully accounted for, measured and priced. It sank somewhere between Phoenicia and Athens. What remains after a shipwreck is not only wood, it is the collapse of plans, the quiet recognition that the future you imagined will not arrive. Zeno walked inland. He entered a bookshop, not out of intellectual hunger at first, but because there was nowhere else to go. There, among scrolls, he encountered a voice that had already outlived its speaker. Xenophon had written about a man who asked questions in the marketplace and refused to stop asking them, even when it cost him his life. Socrates claimed ignorance as his only certainty. Socrates owned nothing of consequence. He introduced a radical proposition that the good life is not found in possessions, but in the condition of the soul. From Socrates came a lineage of severity. Among his philosophical descendants were the Cynics, most famously Diogenes of Sinope, who lived in a barrel and carried his defiance like a weapon. Diogenes stripped life to its barest form. He rejected convention, wealth, and even basic decorum. When asked what he owned, he would point to the ground beneath him. The Cynics were not interested in comfort. They were interested in freedom, freedom from dependence on anything external. Zeno did not adopt the Cynic life in its extremity, but he absorbed its central insight. He began to teach in a public place, a painted porch known as the Stoa Poikile. From this location, his philosophy would take its name. Stoicism. The setting mattered, not a hidden school, not a private garden, a public space, open to noise, interruption, and the movement of ordinary life. Stoicism would not be a retreat from the world. It would be a way of standing within it. Zeno and his followers constructed a system both rigorous and austere. They divided philosophy into logic, physics, and ethics. But it is the ethical core that endures. The claim is simple. Everything external is uncertain, but there is something that remains under your authority, your judgments, your choices, your character. Virtue is the only good because it is the only thing that cannot be taken from you without your consent. A man loses a ship, walks into a bookshop, and leaves with a philosophy that no shipwreck can destroy. The Stoics did not leave virtue undefined. They named it, divided it, examined its structure. There are 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. They are not separate. They are aspects of a single condition, but each reveals a different angle of the same discipline. Wisdom is the ability to see things as they are, not as they appear in moments of fear or desire, but as they are, stripped of distortion. Socrates remains its exemplar. He questioned assumptions others never noticed. A modern situation, a person confronted with conflicting information, news, opinion, reaction. Wisdom is not immediate judgment. It is restraint. It is the decision to suspend conclusion until evidence has been examined. Not knowing is not a failure. It is the beginning of accuracy. Justice is the recognition that one does not live alone. The Stoics believed in a universal community, a shared rationality linking all human beings. To act unjustly is not only to harm another, it is to act against the structure of that shared condition. Marcus Aurelius governed under this principle, imperfectly but consciously. A modern situation, a decision made in private that affects others who are not present. Justice asks whether those absent are being considered as fully as those who are visible. Not sentiment, not preference, but proportion. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the refusal to allow fear to dictate action. Epictetus lived as a slave before he taught philosophy. His body was not his own, but his judgment remained intact. A modern situation, speaking a truth that may not be received well, not loudly, not performatively, but clearly. Courage is often quiet. It does not announce itself. Temperance is measure, not denial, not rejection of pleasure, but the refusal to be governed by it. Seneca wrote extensively on wealth while living among it. He did not reject comfort. He questioned dependence on it. A modern situation, access to constant stimulation, food, information, distraction. Temperance is the decision not to consume simply because consumption is available. The four virtues are not ideals to admire. They are disciplines to enact. They do not promise ease. They do not guarantee outcome. They define a standard. If the virtues describe what the Stoic becomes, the disciplines describe how that becoming occurs. Epictetus structured Stoic practice into 3 disciplines: desire, action, assent. They are not abstract. They are operational. The discipline of desire begins with a division. Some things are within your control, others are not. Health is not fully within your control. Reputation is not within your control. Outcome is not within your control. But judgment is. To desire what is not within your control is to attach your stability to something unstable. A modern scenario, a person waiting for a response, an email, a decision, an outcome. The mind begins to simulate possibilities: approval, rejection, silence. The Stoic intervention is precise. Withdraw desire from the outcome. Place it on the quality of your own action. A practice. Before engaging in any uncertain endeavor, state internally, "I will act well. The result is not mine." The discipline of action concerns how one behaves within the human community. The Stoics believed that rational beings are, by nature, cooperative. To act against others without necessity is to act against one's own structure. A modern scenario, conflict within a workplace, misunderstanding, disagreement, competing interests. The Stoic approach is not passive. It does not avoid confrontation, but it frames action through a question. What serves the common good here? A practice drawn from Epictetus. Before acting, consider whether the action would still be chosen if its consequences were public and permanent. If the answer changes, the action is suspect. The discipline of assent is the most subtle. It concerns the moment between impression and judgment. Something happens, a thought appears, an interpretation follows. The Stoics observed that this sequence is not fixed. There is a gap. A modern scenario, a message received with ambiguous tone. The immediate interpretation is negative. The reaction begins. The Stoic practice is interruption. Do not agree with the first interpretation. Ask, is this necessarily true? Is there another explanation? A practice. Delay judgment by a fixed interval, seconds, minutes, or longer, depending on the situation, not indefinitely, but long enough for the initial impression to lose its authority. Desire, action, assent. 3 disciplines. Not theoretical, not distant. They operate in moments so small they are often unnoticed. The Stoics did not avoid death. They studied it. Memento Mori. Remember you will die. This was not a slogan. It was a practice. To remember death is to remove illusion, not dramatically, not with despair, but with clarity. The Stoic view of the afterlife is simple. There is none. Consciousness ends. The elements disperse. This is not presented as tragedy. It is presented as proportion. If life is finite, then its value is not located in extension, but in use. Marcus Aurelius returned to this thought repeatedly, not as abstraction, as daily practice. He wrote, in effect, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. To contemplate death is not to diminish life, it is to sharpen it. Modern research describes a similar phenomenon. When individuals are reminded of mortality, subtly, without panic, they often reorient. They become less concerned with trivial conflicts, more attentive to relationships, more deliberate in action, not always, but often enough to suggest that awareness of finitude changes behavior. The Stoics arrived at this without experiment. They observed. They concluded that avoidance of death leads to avoidance of life. Death is not an interruption of life, it is its boundary, and boundaries give shape. The Stoics did not leave their philosophy in theory. They wrote instructions. 8 practices remain. Morning intention, source, meditations. Mechanism, anticipate difficulty before it arrives. Modern context, beginning a day that will include friction, delays, disagreement, fatigue. Expectation, in the first week, the practice feels artificial. Then, gradually, events lose their element of surprise. Evening examination. Source, letters to Lucilius. Mechanism, review actions without excuse or exaggeration. Modern context, end-of-day reflection, not on outcomes, but on conduct. Expectation, initial resistance, then increased precision in self-observation. Negative visualization, source, Seneca. Mechanism, imagine loss to reduce attachment and increase appreciation. Modern context, considering absence of what is currently present. Expectation, discomfort, followed by recalibration of value. The view from above, source, Marcus Aurelius. Mechanism, expand perspective beyond immediate concerns. Modern context, stepping back from personal conflict, expectation, reduction in perceived scale of problems. Memento Mori, source, multiple Stoic texts. Mechanism, regular contemplation of death. Modern context, brief, deliberate reflection on finitude. Expectation, not fear, but narrowing of attention to what matters. The reserve clause. Source, Epictetus. Mechanism, append if nothing prevents it to intentions. Modern context, planning with awareness of uncertainty. Expectation, reduced frustration when plans change. Voluntary discomfort. Source, Seneca. Mechanism, periodic exposure to mild hardship. Modern context, deliberate simplicity, cold, hunger, minimalism. Expectation, increased resilience, decreased dependency. The Stoic pause. Source, Epictetus. Mechanism, delay reaction. Modern context, emotional stimulus followed by intentional stillness. Expectation, greater control over response patterns. These practices do not transform immediately, they accumulate. A man stands at the edge of the sea watching what remains of his life dissolve into water. Another stands in a marketplace asking questions no one wants to answer. A third sits in a tent at the edge of an empire, writing notes to himself that no one was meant to read. They are separated by centuries, by circumstance, by language, and yet they arrive at the same conclusion: that what can be taken is not yours, that what remains is sufficient. There is no promise here, no assurance of comfort, no guarantee of outcome, only a structure. A way of standing in the world that does not depend on how the world responds. Time moves without consultation. The question is not how much remains, but how it is used. Do the work of a human being.